Hi everyone, James here from F9. This is a Fender Jazz bass guitar. If you know anything about basses, you might be looking at this and realizing that this is nothing out of the ordinary at all in terms of an instrument. It is a lower mid-level bass that I brought locally from the Guitar Amp and Keyboard Centre for about 650 quid brand new. As I say, the materials in this are nothing special, so therefore the sound is not remarkable. However, this instrument has been on 5 top 10 UK records and 3 international #1s. And believe it or not, every single one of those bass lines was played on one string. So strap in for a minute because I want to answer a whole series of your questions at once, and I will tell you the story, the quite strange, remarkable and often funny story of how Russell and I projected ourselves forward from just UK dance producers to DJs that have ended up playing in every single continent apart from Antarctica. So everybody's journey is quite unique, and one of the reasons why I want to talk about this is that speaking to an awful lot of you, I realise that there's this kind of massive misconception that there's this stratospheric rise and it's all driven around a pinnacle of talent and people and interest and all of this kind of stuff. And my origin story in particular, and Russell's as well, is an awful lot more humble. So I think it's really important that you all understand out there that sometimes just everything falls into place. You're making the right music, the track gets picked up in the right way, and things just elevate from there. So let me take you back to kind of a couple of years into the Freemasons. And Russell and I, by this point, had 2 or 3 single successes. And we were just kind of starting out on our remix journey. And then a very nice chap at EMI called Ben Bleat phoned up our manager and said, would they like to remix Faith Evans? Got a track here called Mesmerise. And of course, we jumped at the chance. Faith Evans, wonderful artist, and to be working at that level on American stuff for us was incredibly exciting. Now, I do need to point out that at this time, I pretty much had only just started really my own course through success in music. Russell had obviously been one half of Fats and Small with Jason Fats. So he'd had a level of success, so he was kind of used to how certain parts of the industry worked. And although I'd worked in major studios, this was the first time I'd been propelling forward as an artist. So a lot of this was very, very new to me. Before this point, financially, I had pretty much nothing. But during this time, we were just starting to break out as DJs. Also, the single success was kind of bringing us some income. So I had a little bit of available money. Now, when it came to the Faith Evans remix, we instantly found out that we had a little bit of a problem. It was in a major key. Now, if any of you have tried to put major chords around dance music, you know that that can be a little bit tricky. But because I'd worked on remixes for years and years at a company called DMC when I was much younger, I realised that there is a clever little trick that you can employ. When you're playing chords, and if there have to be major, there's 2 things you can do. The first one is you can borrow some chords from the minor scale if it's quite a bluesy vocal. Sometimes, depending on the harmonic structure of the song, this doesn't work. But if you can do that, then instantly you can kind of switch between major and minor chords. I'll deal with that on another video. But also, if you do have to play these big, rooted major chords, then you can use the guitarist trick. You can play power chords, and power chords will instantly allow you to kind of get the feeling of those major chords, but without that cheesy third. It is completely bizarre in my opinion, but for some reason, major chords sound great on guitar and they sound cheesy on keyboards. So just playing the root note of the chord and the 5th above it without playing that major third will get you around this. And that's what we employed heavily on the Faith Evans remix. On the Faith Evans remix, we were actually using a sample bass patch that I believe was built into Logic's sound library, just called fingered bass. Now there's 2 ways to play a real bass guitar. You play it with a pick like a guitarist, or you play it with your fingers. And in soul, funk and disco, it's always been the fingered bass sound that's been it. It's warmer, it's got more punch, and it's what you've heard on all of the Chic records, all of the Motown records, etc., etc. So it's a sound that we're really, really familiar with. Now, The Faith Evans remix did incredibly well for us, and what really surprised us is that it went across the pond. Now, in America, there is a very famous chart called the Billboard Hot Club Play 100, I believe it is, and that shows you pretty much what's going on in some of the nightclubs out there. And I believe our mix ended up in the top 5. I think it may have even got to #1 of Faith Evans. That pricked up the ears of Beyonce's people, and suddenly our manager got a phone call from a lovely guy who just said, look, I think we need a Freemasons remix on the new Beyonce single that's coming. It's called Deja Vu, would you like to have a go? Of course, our manager pretty much bit his arm off. As you can imagine, we did all the way down the line. That's an amazing opportunity. We were still at the fledgling part of our remix career and pretty much our production career. Now, this is where things get interesting. The track was off a brand new album called B-Day. No sniggering at the back. B-Day as in birthday, not B-Day as in French bum washer. When we got the vocals from America, we started to go through all of the parts and we realized we were going to have 2 problems. First of all, the original Deja Vu production was actually quite slow, and the fashion for remixes at the time was at about 126 BPM. Now, we did some test time stretching of the vocals and we ran into this real, almost unsurmountable problem. Beyonce has a very, very prominent natural vibrato, and she's really singing out and singing high in some parts of Deja Vu. And when it was time stretched, this chipmunk effect would happen where basically the vibrato would be sped up and it would just sound incredibly unnatural. Now, this was initially really disappointing. And then we came up with a really cunning little ruse. We went through every single part of the lead and main backing vocals that were sung by Beyonce. And we found the bits that, when sped up, were too fast. We went back to the original unstretched vocal, chopped a section out of that, and pieced it back into the sped up vocals. We couldn't believe our luck when it started working. Now, obviously, this is not a simple process because you've got to do this line by line. And when someone has this amazing natural vibrato like Beyonce does, that's a ton of work. But that's what we did. I think we spent about 2.5 days going through the vocals line by line, piece by piece, adding these non-time stretched sustain notes in wherever we could. And the results speak for themselves. We had so many people saying, I can't believe you got the vocals to sound that good at that tempo. Now, at this point, we were just starting to DJ, but I believe at the time Russell was still doing a few gigs with Fats and Small in Germany. So I think he was away for a weekend, and because we'd had a level of success with what we were doing, I had a couple of bits of equipment that I'd been able to purchase and actually had at home because I hadn't actually brought them into Russell's at that time. One of them was a big Roland keyboard that was weighted, and the other one is this, my lovely Fender Jazz bass. As I say, it's not an expensive instrument, but I was kind of fascinated by it and I'd always wanted to play a little bit of bass. There was one problem though. I wasn't a bass player and I didn't know exactly what to do, but my view is, well, the notes are on the fretboard. All I've got to do is kind of whack them occasionally, but I put it all to one side. Then I started to work around some chords, and quickly the main chord progression that ended up being on the record kind of came about. It was in a very basic form by this point. But then I think it was a Sunday night, do you know what? I'm just going to give it a go. And I got the bass out and I started playing. However, there was instantly a problem. A, I wasn't very good. And B, the chord sequence went down to a D. And all 4-string basses are tuned with their lowest note, the open string, at E. So first of all, I tried to detune it to see what could happen down to the D. Sounded dreadful. And then I went, okay, well, what am I going to do? Now, I realized that my bass, my kind of fat, thick fingers weren't exactly in any way trained in the ways of bassdom. So the chances of me being able to use the other strings like a real bass player would were kind of limited. And when I did try that, it just didn't really have any level of punch. And I was very aware of the sonics that you need for club music. So then I thought, well, what happens if I just go all the way up the neck? What happens if I play the D on very high on the bottom string. So that's what I did. So as I was kind of working parts out for this, I realized that I was going to be moving all the way from down here up to about here on the fretboard. But A, it solved the problem. It allowed me to get the note. And I was then playing the note on the thickest string of this guitar, which gave it a little bit more clout than it would do if you played it on any of the highs. Now, then I started kind of getting a bit cocky, and I just thought, why don't I just actually try to play the part? The noises were shocking, but I ended up going, and I did a great big slide, and I went, I really like that. And that is pretty much, over the course of the next few hours, how I put the bass line together for Deja Vu. I, at this point, was not a bass player. I played it all on one string on a £650 bass guitar, and it went to number one. Now, I just want you to 100% understand that I am not telling you this to show off in any way, shape or form. I am telling you this because it doesn't matter what you damn well use to make music. It's the musical parts that you play and you add and you create. And there is one thing that I will always say to anybody making music is if you play it with passion and if you play it like you really frigging mean it, it really doesn't matter. That gets recorded. And that, in my opinion, is one of the most important things about the remix that we actually ended up with at the end of it. Both Russell and I really were passionate about this mix, and we were so happy with the way it came out. So the next step is I took all of these fairly rough bits round to Russell's, and he sat me down and went, right, okay, let's work on this and let's sort it all out. And we went through everything, and then we did what only Russell and I think, were capable of doing, is that we made that arrangement. And anybody who tells you that a production is just about the sounds and the work that you've put into that is lying. It is about the arrangement and how you can take someone and make them feel special in a short period of time just by listening to your music. And that was the amazing connection that Russell and I had between DJ and musician. And it's something that I would highly recommend all of you explore. Don't just sit in a room bashing things together and expecting to get greatness. You need to bounce ideas off each other. And if you have to do that virtually or over Zoom or by whatever means, you need to give it a try. So by this point, we had the drums. We were very good at putting those kind of things together. We had the basic chord structure. We had my rough bass parts and my piano chops that had come in. Then we were able to start making the groove. And this was the key to everything that we were doing back then. And if anybody asks us how we did it, well, we just used to listen to a lot of Chic. We used to listen all the time to their work, not just as artists, but as producers. Because if any two people nailed down the feeling for the kind of music that just makes everybody instantly want to stand up, it's Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards. And I make no bones about the fact that Russell and I were 100% influenced by the grooves that they managed to create. Now, when it came to putting something like this together, we were both aware that electric guitar parts at the time, if someone's playing full chords over the top, it kind of never quite sounds as good as it does within real disco productions. And that's probably a mixture of tape machines, how things were mixed, everybody playing together in that era, etc., etc. One of the things that we worked out very early on that we could emulate were muted and picked single note guitar parts. And this we used to great success over our career. Now, if you listen, really carefully listen to the Beyonce Deja Vu remix, you will hear the guitar bits in the background will pick out key rhythms in the vocal. And here is a really important point that I want to make about vocal remixing. You are the custodian of the song. It is your job to bring the song into a completely different structure, a different style, but still make that vocal shine. And the easiest way to do it is to help pick out some of the key moments of the vocal rhythm. And if you listen back to Freemasons' remix of Beyonce Deja Vu, you'll hear these guitar parts picking out. Now, from an audio source, what was interesting is the bass came back into play for this. Some of those guitar bits are actual from sample packs because we were at the beginning of the sample pack download industry, really spearheaded by Loopmasters, who are local to Brighton at us at the time. But also I found out that you can get some really cool little single pick notes off a bass guitar if you're clever and if you mute the strings after you've played them. So they were actually doubled up with another part from this bass. And again, the point I'd like to make is just grab stuff, just try it. Nobody's watching and nobody's judging. If you want to know how we were able to take this quite Heath Robinson process and make it work the way that it did, it's that because we were both very experienced, we'd done a lot of this beforehand. So we're able to kind of throw all of this stuff into the mixing pot. Have a listen to any of the Freemasons remixes from that time and you will hear us use the rhythms of the vocal and replicate them in either musical parts, bass parts, or even drums. I think our mix of Precious Love, we took the don, 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 don at the end of the piano riff and punched that out with kick drums. Now that reinforces that rhythm and that music home, and that is an incredibly useful tool, and it's one that I've pretty much laid my career on. So anyway, we were getting this thing together. We had the full arrangement. It was all kind of working. But the computers were starting to really struggle at the end of it because we don't, at this point within production, we didn't have all this amazing power that we did now. So we had to bounce the damn thing out into a series of stems because we just actually got to the point where we couldn't play the remix from start to finish. Now, this is a very, 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 very risky business. So what we did is we just went home when we'd made the decision that that was what we were going to do. We went home, came back the next day with clear ears and then worked quietly to make sure that we had all of the parts that we were passing down in the best possible way. Now this takes real discipline, but you've got to think about this. If you just blast your ears with music, you're going to get the balances wrong. So trying to do a stem out at the end of a session is a terrible idea. So give yourself room. There is always another day in a production or a remix. No matter what anybody tells you, nobody's going to a pressing plant, nobody's going to a digital distributor directly after you hand them the mix. The number of times record companies have pushed me to finish something and then you get it done on a Friday night, oh, fantastic, well done for delivering, and then they don't do anything for a week. It just sits on someone's desk. Yeah, it's great, we had the meeting, oh, it's just nonsense. That extra week could have been spent bringing that track up to an even better level. So don't let anybody ever tell you that there is the deadline that they are suggesting. You can always squeeze it just a little bit. Anyway, we had these stems and then we started piecing together, and then we did something that we'd kind of done once before and then proved to be an absolutely vital way of working. We'd finished the club mix, but we had put it down and we were happy. And then we decided to go on to the dub mix. It was at the time when, as well as a main vocal mix, the record companies wanted a kind of alternate version. And what we learned over that process is you will always come up with a great idea on the dub mix that you can maybe then transfer into the club mix. And we'd already learned we don't do the radio edit at all. We don't even look at it until we've got these extended versions done, because you're always going to find something in the extended versions that is going to be able to inspire you on the radio edit. When we started stripping all the vocals out and then bringing some of the music and looping it together, we suddenly realized we could use some of the chords in a different manner and we could make a fantastic intro out of it. So that's what we did. We finished the dub mix and then we went back to the club mix and made, in my opinion, my favorite intro of any club mix that we'd worked on. The one thing that we were missing that I think we'd also worked out in the dub was there was just not quite enough little movement in the drums. So I think we added either some loops or some additional little percussion parts, just picking out certain rhythms. And this is something that you really need to learn how to do. Every now and again, just try and find those extra little spots to put some wood blocks or something like that in, just to pick out these additional rhythms. That's what make people's feet tap, other than just boom tish, because you've heard that a zillion times. It's all these extra little bits that will actually really make people's feet tap. And before you know it, we were just looking at this production that we knew was stunning. And there's very few times in my career that I could ever really say that we knew something was going to work. But we did when we had this, because we knew it hit the zeitgeist right. We knew we had the vocals bang on, and we knew, most importantly, that it was going to make people dance. And I remember our manager phoning up Russell, and I was so happy. I was downstairs. Russell had a courtyard just outside his house. And Martin, our manager, was going, "What's it like? What's it like?" And I'm going, "Mate, I'm going to be honest, this feels like a career-defining mix." And I was not wrong. That one mix changed absolutely everything for Russell and I. And before I knew it, we were all over the world DJing off the back of it. And then all of the work that you probably know us for started to come in. But I didn't stop using this baby. This ended up on Kelly Rowland work. And I've had Sophie Ellis-Bextor's husband said, when the bass comes in on work, it's exactly as loud as it should be. And that's this baby. It was going through a valve desk by that point. We had a couple of other bits that we were set up with in Russell's spare room. And here's the other thing. All of the mixes that I'm talking about were created in Russell's spare room. This then ended up on tracks like Uninvited. It ended up playing a kind of almost baritone guitar parts on the Sophie Ellis-Bextor single that we made. And also it appeared, I believe, on the Beyonce and Shakira track. So it's done the rounds. And please don't anybody, I hope this story really highlights, don't let anybody be snobbish about instruments. It doesn't matter whether you're using a Behringer copy of a synth. It doesn't matter whether you've got an original Mini Moog. It doesn't matter what you've got. As Rowan Atkinson once said, it doesn't matter what you've got, it's where you stick it. So there we go. That is the story that changed our entire professional lives. And from that moment, we were just projected into places we could only actually dream of. The reason I tell you all of this is that, as you can see, none of this involved the kind of things that you might expect. And if I can do it, and if Russell can do it, then so can you guys. It just takes you to get onto one of those peaks of possibilities and suddenly everything can explode. But you have to be at your absolute A game. So practice, practice, practice. I came into this kind of work with years of remixing behind me from DMC, so I knew what I was doing. I hope this story's been of use and of inspiration to you. We'll do more videos here and we'll see you next time.